I need to apologize for my cough too. Now,
I'm apologizing for my playoff beard.
We need to get some people over at the University of Iowa Hospitals and Clinics working on a cure for the common cold. I don't know, Mike.
There's a couple ways I can go with this. Sam Bradford in 2008 played behind one of the best offensive lines, arguably in college football history. Some of you older folks out there might think it's a stretch, but based in my lifetime, he played behind one of the best offensive lines I've seen ever. And when he goes into the 2009 season, he gets hurt immediately and then re-injures against BYU. He gets hurt in the first game, and then immediately when he returns against Texas, he gets hurt again. So behind the Rams, an offensive line that'll be fragile, that'll struggle with opposing defenses, will he continue to get banged up? Will he hurt his shoulder again? That's something that would scare me in terms of drafting a player like him. Now the problem is the way the NFL draft is set up, you've got to pay these big dollars, $50 million guaranteed to Sam Bradford to get him to when you have the first pick. And when you're going to spend $50 million, unfortunately, most of the time for your value, you need to pick a quarterback, somebody who can come in and really lead an offense. But if it was me making the pick, I would have taken Incompetent Suh because, like you said, Jordan, he was a Heisman candidate, and he's one of those players that I think is a once-every-decade kind of player, especially on defense. When we saw Charles Woodson at Michigan, who won a Heisman, and you don't see too many corners resemble what he did in college at Michigan. I think Suh's the same kind of player. He almost single-handedly took down that entire Texas offense in that Big 12 championship game. So I would have taken Suh, but I think Bradford would go second. I think you'd put him ahead of Gerald McCoy or Trent Williams or Eric Berry, but Suh would have been the number one pick.
Well, I don't know if he could have gone. Was it second to the Lions?
Well, Bradford was the sexy pick.
Yeah.
But I think Suh would have been the better pick. But I guess Suh probably doesn't sell a lot of tickets. And the thing is, as somebody on the Rams put it, is Suh doesn't score touchdowns either, so I guess I know where they're coming from. But you know what? If I had to pick between taking Donovan McNabb or having the first-round pick and taking Sam Bradford, I'd take McNabb. You got him at a lot better value. You got him at a lot better value too. I know next year they're talking about maybe putting a cap on rookie players. I mean, what do you guys think about that?
I'm not a big believer in caps. I don't think that they should restrict these teams in that manner, but that's up for debate for them. But I think with the Rams, A.J. Feely or Sam Bradford, it's tough when you have to fall back on a guy like A.J. Feely. So I understand why they made the decision, but I still would have taken Suh.
Yeah, and with the caps, my stance on it, I'm not a huge fan either. A lot of times, you see these teams like the Yankees going out and spending that kind of money. It's because not all cases, most cases, that team is getting that kind of money to spend on big-time players because of the success and the fans in their stands.
Talk about college basketball now. College basketball time. The tournament will not expand to 96 teams, thankfully. It's not going to expand to 80 teams. It's going to expand to 68 teams. And you know what? It's just a big sigh of relief after hearing that, at least in my opinion, because that would have just made the tournament awful. But I guess this was maybe contingent on the new TV deal, which is why they maybe added a few more teams. So personally, I'm not really too against it. Why? Because compared to what it was talked about being 96 or 80, I think this alternative is a lot better. But personally, I think it would have been a lot better just to not touch it at all. I don't know what you guys think, Mike. I mean, what do you think of the tournament expanding to 68 teams?
I would still prefer to keep it at 65.
I'm with you there completely.
But this is an incremental expansion, a very small expansion, so it's something that the public and people in the college basketball world can swallow because it's only adding 3 teams. So I can live with it. I understand it, and I think it's okay because, it gives a couple teams another shot like a Dayton maybe to get into the tournament or play their way into the larger bracket. So I can live with it, but I would prefer to keep it at 65. And unfortunately, I think this is just one incremental step for further down the road, and they're going to expand to something like a 98-team tournament within the next decade or 15 years, which is a long way away, but it's just one step in that process, unfortunately.
Yeah, I really hope that this doesn't, just kind of have, a whirlwind effect and pick up speed and expand, like, you just mentioned. But I really wouldn't have minded if they left it at 65. The fact they only added 3 more, 68, not too big of a deal. If you look at the tournament, too, this year, when it really came down to it, the bubble teams, there was a pretty definitive last 4 out going on. there were teams that were the only ones that could even make an argument for supposed to being in the tournament. And even those teams had knocks against them, but still, you didn't see a huge list of teams that really had a true argument to have gotten in. Illinois and Virginia Tech come to mind. They both had things for and against them. They would have gotten in if it was 68. But, they didn't need to touch it. And I really hope that this doesn't pick up speed and cause them to just turn it into a 96-team mediocre celebration free-for-all.
Yeah. And the teams who get left out in the 65-team format, they have reasons that they're left out. And I think you can replace teams that were left out like Virginia Tech, like Mississippi State, like Illinois, with teams that got in like UTEP or Utah State that probably shouldn't have gotten in. But, if they would have just won a few more games, not lost to teams like Rider, or not had terrible schedules that were ranked out of conference in the 300s like Virginia Tech, then I think they would have had a more legitimate excuse about being left out. But, in the end of the day, you got to win a couple more games. But when it comes to 68 teams, I'm with you, Mike. I think over time it's going to expand even more. It's like blowing that air into that balloon. It's just going to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And just because of all the money that's involved in this, over $10 billion, I think it's going to keep growing.
And like you said, unfortunately, the expansion talk is reflected in and exacerbated by money. It's not about getting that extra team in there on that sole principle. It's about making a few more bucks. And don't get me wrong, I'm all about capitalism and free markets and spending money, but at the same time, we have a system now that's very effective and very efficient, and we have a great regular season in college basketball. And if 68 is doable, but if you expand to 96, you wipe out the significance of what Minnesota did in the Big Ten tournament, or what Georgia and Mississippi State did in past years in the SEC tournament to get to the field of 65. And that's what makes college basketball great. So I really don't want to see that change.
Yeah, and then I don't know. Actually, I don't really know exactly what they're going to do. So how are they going to implement these more teams in? Is it more playing games, or do you know what
I believe it's playing games, but I can't speak for sure.
Is it going to be now 65 through 68?
Yeah,
have
I've heard
a
they're
little
going to play
14 tournament.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating about that situation, or
have a playing
controversial, is that who are those teams? Are they the teams from the small mid-major conference, or is it a team like Virginia Tech going to sneak into that mix? Because you can't, if Virginia Tech works their way in from that group of 4 into the field of 64, you can't make them a 16 seed.
Yeah.
Are you going to plug them in as a 12? We'll have to see how that develops and plays out.
Because if you talk about money, Virginia Tech fans are going to travel more to the first round games than Lehigh.
And of course,
they
that's
might
predicated
have more. Their amount of traveling fans might be more total fans than.
And of course, I am assuming that somebody like Virginia Tech would win, but I mean, based on what they play in, who they play in the ACC, and who they might compete against in some of these smaller conferences like the NEC or whoever it is, you would assume that Virginia Tech would get in there.
Okay, let's talk more about college basketball. Kirk Spirit named the Iowa coaching staff. I think this is a great hire. Why? First of all, because you wanted to get somebody on this coaching staff with a lot of experience. You take a look at the other coaching staff, all great guys. You look at guys, though, like Lavelle Jordan and Joel Cornette. They didn't really have the experience. They were just pretty much played at Butler for Coach Licklider, and then were thrown in as assistant coaches at Butler and then here at Iowa. But you take a look at a guy like Kirk. I mean, head coach 1993 to 2010 at Central Florida, taking him to the NCAA tournament 4 times, racked up 279 wins. I mean, and he played at Iowa under Lute Olson, was an assistant in Iowa under Lute Olson, and he's from my hometown of Sioux City, Iowa, so give a little shout out to Sioux City, Iowa. So there's not a whole lot not to love in this situation here. So I think it's great to get someone like him on the staff. What are you guys thinking about as Coach McCaffrey tries to assemble a staff? What do you guys think of, adding someone like this?
Well, I like it. One, it never hurts to have head coaching experience on your staff, as long as you make sure the clear leader is established, and I have no doubt that McCaffrey will do that. You can't complain about adding him to the staff, and, he can clearly recruit, Central Florida, not a real likely team to get into the tournament very often, but every few years he gets them kind of in the talk, and you got MJ's kid to go down to Central Florida, so maybe he can get some more talent and athleticism out here.
Look him up on YouTube. He used to do this thing with the student section. He would go crowd dive into the student section